So what is the connection between trauma and inner child healing? What's
Yeah.
the correlation? Why is this important?
Yes, that's a very great question. In fact,
People, a little louder.
that's a very great question. That's a very great question. In fact, is it okay? The sound is okay.
Yeah, you're clear, but you're getting a little soft in between. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So definitely. So I would also thank somewhere Nitu and all of you, because I think we were talking about this modality way back in 2021. And the whole thing about sexual abuse, trauma abuse basically came up during that time. Although
Right.
as I said, this was going on a different track, but it kind of got a different kind of alignment, if I may use that word. So there are 7 types of trauma which are there out in the world. So 7 types of trauma. I would like to delve a bit into it. So a trauma is caused by an almond-shaped thing in our brain, back of the brain, which is known as amygdala. So amygdala is an almond-shaped gland in our brain, which gives rise to various, I would say, visions. So that vision, amygdala, is to create a kind of a recollection of certain aspects to create some fears inside us. Now, somehow, we take fears as our enemies, whereas fears are our friends. I have given the full form of fears many a time, but I'll repeat it again today. So the full form of fears, which I look at it after that process, is basically the future empowerment awareness response system. So they are actually telling you to do certain changes, make certain changes. So amygdala has this process of highlighting certain visual cameras of certain events to you for you to release them. Maybe it may be a karmic lesson which is coming to you, which you just need to learn and move forward. But problem is we become too attached to that vision, and maybe maybe it could be a karmic guru who is giving us some lesson, and there we are just running away from a situation, being rigid about it. We get nightmares about certain things. So all it must be something which is where it is your stepping stone forward. But we are running away from that stepping stone. And so amygdala is there to help us. In fact, there have been studies in USA where they have removed the amygdala of people who had these psychological disorders. But they saw that these people became reckless. So it's a proof. They became reckless means brutal. They had no fear of law, no fear of anybody around them. So the amygdala, the whole idea behind this is to keep us more civil in nature. Civil, and even following our paths, life path, soul path, and so on and so forth. So amygdala has that process. So amygdala also gives us visions for our life path, soul path, but somehow we because I'll tell you what, like if you look at adventure, people who get into finance end up being a doctor. People who are actually doctors, they end up into merchant banking. Those who are engineers also end up into sales and marketing. So it's just that they follow someone else's vision, and then they end up, at least thankfully, they end up and get into something. Otherwise, there is a chance that you might lose all the aspects. Because I remember one person who used to stay in my society. He was a topper, #1 student, always ranked #1, always ranked #1. Now, in 10th SSC, that was in India, we call it SSC. So in 10th, he came second for some reason. And he lost his mental stability completely. And he became a vagabond after that. He's completely forget studies. He was not even able to go forward on his career. So that is the trauma of carrying too much of expectation, responsibility from his parent, or maybe due to his circumstances. But what happened? completely devastated. His life was completely over. So that gave me one definite idea saying that I will do my best, but where the outcome is concerned, it is not in my hands. So somewhere we need to surrender that to the Almighty. But I know one thing, that if you put an honest effort, then the intentions are honest and good, and they are in line with your blueprint, 100% result will be in your favor.
Fantastic.
So 7 types of trauma, which I was trying to get into, is basically, I'll just share the names. PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is about, okay, so PTSD is the aggravated version. It starts as acute stress disorder. So any event which happens to you, any accident, God forbid, any attack, let's say, God forbid, someone has got attacked, or maybe someone has some operation, some surgery. If someone has been in a hospital for a long time, even that can remain as a trauma. And so if, let's say someone who is in an ICU for more than a week, generally they also express stress and anxiety issues. They develop those anxiety issues later on. So even those, so PTSD, so ASD becomes PTSD, acute stress disorder. Then we have 2 very interesting ones. It is the reaction attachment disorder and dissociative social exhibition disorder, DSED we call it. So RAD is all about where a person is suppressed. The child, let's say people who are on transfer jobs all across the country. So like in army, government officials, and maybe, you know, so I'm not trying to degrade them at all. Please, there is no intention like that. The only thing is that because it is a transferable job, the child doesn't have a general, you know, common friend circle, or they will have even their, let's say their caretakers might also change every, whenever there is a change. So somewhere they end up blaming themselves for these changes. Plus, children who are involved in divorce, God forbid, even those children have the similar issues. So RAD is all about suppressed children. So they live in a shell, they don't open up. And DSED on the other side is the vociferous ones. So RAD is the inferiority complex children, and DSED is the superiority complex children. So DSED is predominantly a children type where any fraudster can immediately, you know, just tell them that, you have no, you know, you cannot do this. So they will take it, no, I can do that. So fraudsters easily can convince them to give away with their money. And there are people who I have cleared. There was a lady who was defrauded at least 6 times in 1 year. So that lesson was not being learned. In the sense, she was always falling for it. She was always falling for it. She always was also falling into love issues. And she would end up, the person would ditch her, would 2-time her, and all this kind of stuff. So because she has a very low value for self. So she was always looking for love around. So these are the kind of examples. And after that, there is also these, you know, secondary trauma. Secondary trauma is like we all healers and people in the medication, doctors, these are the secondary trauma healers. So basically, like for example, I may be getting about 10 calls every day listening to people's tragedies and whatever issues they are facing. So you be also kind of attached to them. So that is the secondary disorder, stress disorder. Then we have, I will briefly sum it up. So secondary stress disorder, then there is even, for example, if you're shifting to another country or another society, new society, so even that adjustment disorder. And there is one final, which is a general stress trauma, trauma disorder, for keeping in mind nearly all the parameters. If there may be too many, 2 or 3 or all of them together. So these are about the trauma. So there are 7 traumas. And all the traumas are basically somewhere it is making you into a limited individual, depending on your experience and so on and so forth.